Story time. I babysat a lot of kids in my neighborhood, and there was this one night that I was babysitting a 2-year-old. It was around 10 o'clock at night, so the kid was sleeping, and I was just sitting in the living room. In the living room, there's a big TV, a couch, and then behind me, it was a wall with a giant window. So it was really late at night, I had nothing to do, so I was Snapchatting my friends. If you Snapchat anybody, I'm sure you know that sometimes you Snapchat really fast. You don't even know or look at what you're sending. I was mass snapping all my friends, and then one of them replied 10 minutes later. And he said, "Who's that guy behind you?" And I turned around and no one was there, so I'm like, he's playing a joke on me. But then I get another Snapchat from this friend I had, and she lives all the way across the country. They don't know each other. And she said, "I think there's someone outside." So I was really freaked out because I was alone. There was a giant window behind me. Apparently there was someone outside. I wasn't gonna call the child's parents because I didn't want to freak them out, but I was scared. So then I went around the house, locked all of the doors. Sorry, it's a really long story, like for part 2. Part 2. So yeah, there was a guy outside the window. So yes, I did lock all the doors and everything. I made sure everything was secure. I closed the blinds. So for the rest of the night, nothing else really happened other than this really weird thump. It was like someone was knocking on a window. Allow me to demonstrate. I ignored it because I was in denial that this was happening. The rest of the night was normal. The parents came home. I drove really fast home. And then the next morning I wake up. And apparently, an old man with Alzheimer's had escaped from his little home. I did not know this because it was dark outside, and even if I did see him outside the window, I wouldn't have known this. But he was naked. Naked. So it wasn't like a mass murderer outside the window, but it was a naked man with Alzheimer's looking at me through a window. It's not every teenage girl's dream, but it's really weird just knowing that a naked old man was staring at me through a window.
Welcome back to Reddit Stories. About 18 years ago, my wife and I wanted to adopt a child, and we were paired up with an Asian couple. We assured them the child would be loved, which was the truth because we instantly fell in love with our baby boy. After about 8 months, though, we started to feel twinges of guilt because our perfect Chinese son was going to be raised in this whitewashed household by 2 ding-dongs who were unable to provide him with any sort of connection to his cultural heritage or identity. There happened to be a large Chinese population in our city, though, so it seemed like a no-brainer for us to expose him as much as we could. We enrolled him in Mandarin classes, and we even developed a relationship of sort with a Chinese couple who became his adopted auntie and uncle. We even took family trips to China every couple of years. Flash forward to recently, he's now 17 years old and getting ready to go to college, so my wife and I are helping him fill out the financial aid form. Digging through my office for the needed paperwork, I came across his adoption papers, and it was only then that I saw it. Something so obvious, so painfully brick to the face obvious. Something that neither my wife nor I in the stupidity of our youth had registered. The names on the adoption paperwork were Park and Kim. Our son was Korean.
This is why you should never talk to strangers in an elevator. One day, a surgeon was working the night shift at a hospital. He just finished his operation on a patient and was going to the basement. He entered the elevator and there was one other woman already inside. They were casually chatting when the elevator door opened and another woman was about to enter. But the surgeon looked horrified. He quickly slammed the close button and punched the highest floor of the building. Surprised, the woman asked why he was being so rude and wouldn't let the other woman in the elevator with them. The surgeon explained that in this hospital, all patients wear white wristbands with their names printed on them, but the red wristbands are placed on all of the corpses. The surgeon then looks to the woman in the elevator with him and says, "That was the same woman I just operated on. She died on the operating table. Didn't you see the red wristband she was wearing?" The woman in the elevator with him just smiled, raised her arm, and said, "You mean like this one?"
One of my fans has a crazy mother. Story time. So me and my mom decided to go to Walmart to pick up a couple things. While I was there, I ran into a little girl who happened to be a fan of mine, and she was with her mother, and her mother was wearing this black shiny bracelet. Just keep that in mind. So they come up to me and they're super nice at first, and her mom's like, "Hey, my daughter's a big fan of yours. Do you mind taking a picture with her?" So of course I'm being really nice back, and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" The little girl comes over to me, and she was really cute too, but she stands next to me so her mom can take a picture of us. Then her mom goes, "Give him a hug, sweetie." And I didn't really want to do that because of social distancing, but I didn't say anything. The little girl actually opened up her mouth and she was like, "Mom, I don't think I can because of social distancing." And all I said was, "Yeah, it's probably best that we don't." As soon as I said that, her mom starts flipping out. She calls me a horrible person, makes her daughter unfollow me, and then they storm off. And me and my mom were just like, "What?" Then later on in the parking lot, as we're pulling off, something flies into the window and smacks me in the face. And when I picked it up, it was her mom's black bracelet.
If you're ever driving late at night, don't do what they did. Two boys picked up a girl on the side of the road while they were on their way to a school dance. In the car, she kept saying that she was cold, so one of the boys gave her his jacket. But when the night ended and they were about to drop her off, the girl accidentally left with the jacket. So the boys said that they would just come back the next day to get it. But when they came back and knocked on her door, they discovered something that would make them question what is real and what isn't. An old woman opened the door and asked them who they were looking for. After talking to her for a while, it was revealed that the girl they found on the side of the road was her daughter. But the thing is, she had been dead for 12 years. She was killed in a car accident at the same street corner they first saw her. The old woman pointed to a cemetery down the road and said, "That's where we buried her." The boys didn't believe her at first. They'd spent the whole night with this girl, so they knew that she had to be real. But they went to the cemetery and saw the boy's jacket draped over a gravestone. And on the gravestone was the girl's name and the date of her death, exactly 12 years ago to the day.
When I was younger, I was in Walmart and I was eating a tube of Pringles and I ate them while my mom paid, but I forgot to let the guy scan them, so I walked out the Walmart and the alarm went off and I just started running because I got scared and my mom couldn't find me because I was hiding behind the newspaper things, and the Walmart people called the police because I was missing, and when I hear them show up I thought I was a criminal, so I left my mom a note on the newspaper that said I went to Mexico to start a new life and not come looking for me, and then I took off running with my Pringles and ran for like an hour, and then the cops saw me walking down the road so they pulled over, so I started running again, and then they were using the car intercom thing and they told me to stop running. So when I did, I thought they were gonna put me in handcuffs and take me to jail, so I was crying and I slapped the officer in the stomach and tried to run again, but he just held me back, and when he asked me what happened to me and I told him, he started crying because he was laughing so hard. And he just gave my mom $2 for the Pringles and he was still laughing when he left. And that's the time I was a wanted criminal.
This is an ongoing mess that continues to haunt me. My sister is recently engaged to her boyfriend of many years. He proposed to her at one of our family barbecues, and I was really happy for them until I saw the ring. Sister had hinted that her and her boyfriend were discussing tying the knot, and we discussed rings at length. I went online and searched for the type of ring she said she was interested in and happened across a very unique and pretty ring on Etsy, but it had a fake middle stone. As soon as I saw the ring, I recognized it. Everyone knows they're supposed to spend at least 3 to 4 months paying on an engagement ring. He has a good paying job, and 4 months wages for him would be at least 8 to 10K at an estimate. I know for a fact that this ring was $450. I waited until the proposal was over and asked the couple for a quiet word, but that had the opposite effect as I was overheard by the entire family. I told my sister I had seen her ring online and it wasn't a real diamond or even expensive. I accused her boyfriend of trying to cheap out of one of the most important gifts of her entire life. She burst into tears and said she gave him a budget of $400. She didn't want a real diamond. She's lost every piece of jewelry she's owned, and she didn't want to be devastated by losing this if she ever does. Thought I was doing my sisterly duty by pointing out the fake ring. Am I the asshole for telling my sister?
So did we all go to high school with a girl that pretended to be pregnant? So here's my story. The girl literally was my friend. I've known her since elementary school. So I remember one day she just stopped coming to school. She just stopped. So me and my little friend group was texting her, messaging her, trying to reach her. Like, girl, where you at? Where you been? It's been a month. So then there's a rumor going around school that she got kidnapped by a black family. Yeah, she was. So one day she came to school. But she came to school with a bandage on her stomach, telling us that her mom had stabbed her in the stomach because she found out that she was pregnant and tried to kill the baby. But the story didn't make no sense because she was like, yeah, I was 2 weeks pregnant. And we was like, how do you, girl, no, the math is not mathing. So then it turns out she just was in foster care and during that time, and I, to this day, still don't know why she lied. Yeah.
My mom spanked my bully. Story time. When I was in 3rd grade, I used to hate going to the bus stop because there was a boy there who would bully me. And it got so bad that some days I would go home crying. I felt like I couldn't do anything because he was much older than I was. So of course I told my mom, and she called the school and they did nothing about it. So then my mom somehow found out who his parents were and she went to go talk to them. And all they said about it was, boys will be boys, there's really nothing we can do about it. And then that's when my mom was like, if y'all don't handle it, I will. So the next morning she told me to go to the bus stop, and if my bully bothered me, to come back home and tell her. So I went to the bus stop, and of course he bothered me. So I went back home, told my mom, and she immediately grabbed her belt and dragged me back to the bus stop. She walked up to that boy and was like, are you bothering my son? And the boy was like, yes I am. What are you gonna do about it, grandma? My mom grabbed that boy by his shirt, turned him around, and started spanking him with her belt. And it was so loud. Literally got his cheeks clapped.
If this doesn't prove how dangerous our world can be sometimes, then I don't know what will. So a girl named Jessalyn sent me her story through my Instagram. She was about 9 years old when she was in Las Vegas with her family, and she was going home to LA and they needed to stop for gas. Jessalyn really needed to pee, so her dad stopped at the Buffalo Bill Casino and Resort, and he takes her to the bathroom. So he waits for her, and then they leave together. And as they're exiting, they get approached by this random lady that literally came from a van. And she says, "How much?" Jezebel and her dad are really confused, so they're like, "What?" And the lady in the van points at Jezebel and says, "How much for that little girl?" Immediately, he goes, "She's not for sale." And the woman actually grabs Jezebel and tries to pull her, but Jezebel's dad slapped the woman's hand. No, 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 no. So Jezebel and her dad walk back over to the car where her mom and her brothers are, and her dad says, "Oh my God, you cannot believe what happened." And he tells her. Then the lady from the van goes up to the mother's window, opens her purse, and shows a lot of money. And she says, "You have 2 sons, just give me the girl." And then she tried to tell them that she couldn't have kids and she just really wanted one. She was really persistent, and they drove off and then called the cops.
This girl literally lived a nightmare. A 17-year-old girl was watching TV late at night when her motion detector lights in her driveway suddenly went on. She assumed it was just an animal, so she got up, drew the blinds, and went back to watching TV. Then a little bit later, it happened again. Before she could even react, she looks over and clearly makes out a silhouette of a person right behind the blinds who starts banging aggressively on the window. The girl stands up and goes, "I'm gonna call the cops!" And the figure stops for just a second, sprints to the side door and starts pounding even louder on that, screaming incoherently. The girl runs to the bathroom, barricades herself inside while she waits for the police, and then her worst nightmares come true. She hears glass shatter in the other room. After a few minutes of silence, she opens her door just a crack to get a peek outside, and standing in her living room next to a broken window is some crazy old woman who looks over at her and starts sprinting toward her. The lady comes smashing into the door and starts wailing on it until the police arrive and take her away. She was a lunatic who had escaped her facility.
I'm gonna tell you guys why I don't keep food in my room anymore. At least why I don't keep this particular food in my room anymore. So when I was a kid, my dad used to leave the country a lot. Every time he would come back, he'd always bring us some sort of goodie. Always be like bracelets, t-shirts, and candy. One time after a trip to, I think it was Dominican Republic, brought us back a bunch of lollipops. These are not normal lollipops like you're thinking in your head. These are these giant brown flat lollipops. Now, instead of eating them, me and my sister decided it would be best to hoard them. Yes, that's right, keep them in our room for as long as possible. For what purpose? I don't know. I think it was probably like, no, we can't eat them now. If something happens and we need them. Bruh. It's not every day that we got candy, apparently. So we kept them in our room. We kind of put them on display, up against the wall, right in between both of our beds, in this very room. This time I was about 6? My sister's about a year and a half older than me, so she was like 7, I guess. Now, these lollipops were given to both of us. They were displayed equally distanced between both of our beds, because they belonged to us both. I'm not really sure how this happened. But one night, me and my sister went to bed, but then my sister started tossing and turning. Calls out for my mom. My mom comes and she's like, "What's wrong?" Okay, this is part 2 of why I don't keep food in my room anymore. So my mom came into our room. She asked my sister, "Hey, what's wrong?" She was like, "Oh, my body, I'm itchy." Mom's like, "Oh, maybe there's a mosquito." My sister's like, "No, it's all over." She moves my sister out of the bed. "Maybe it's your bed." She looks at her blanket. "Oh my gosh, there's ants here." She shakes the blanket. Ants crawl everywhere. Under her pillow, ants. She lifts the mattress. Guys, her bed was infested with ants. Why? There was the faintest trail leading to our lollipops. My mom's like, "Hey, you get out of the bed." So I got out of bed, they checked my bed, was completely clean. There was one measly ant, literally one. One. My bed had no issues. Sister could not sleep there. So they ended up throwing our lollipops away and we were devastated. And my sister got a lot of unnecessary ant bites and I didn't get any. It's okay, because every time we go outside, I get swarmed with mosquitoes and she doesn't get bit at all. Damn, bye.
I may have gotten a child in trouble today. Story time. So today I went to the store to buy some things because I needed some things. So I went to the store, gathered all my items, and then I got in line. And I ended up being behind a mom and her son had to be like 6 or 7 years old. So the boy and his mom get up to the register, and you know how they have candy next to the register for you to buy? The little boy asked his mom if he could have a chocolate, and she was like, "No, you don't need any right now." So he gets mad, folds his arm, and then he turns around and he looks at me. And this is where I may have made a mistake. I lean down and I whisper to him and I'm like, "Just steal the chocolate, nobody's gonna notice." Now, of course I was joking, but he actually took the chocolate and put it in his pocket. And I thought he was gonna get away with it too, but he did not. While I was at the register buying my stuff, they start walking out the door and a security guard came from the back and stopped them. And security was like, "What do you got in your pocket, little buddy? You plan on buying that?" And then the little boy's mom starts yelling at him and she's like, "What do you have in your pockets? I didn't teach you to steal. You were not raised like that." And I ain't say nothing. I bought my stuff and walked right past him. I faked my death. Story time. Growing up, my older brother would never listen to our mom. Like whatever she said, he would do the complete opposite. One day my mom had got us these basketballs and she told us to not play with them in the house. But of course my brother did not listen. So my mom leaves us alone for like 2 seconds and my brother starts throwing his basketball around. And I'm looking at him like, what are you doing? And he's like, mind your business, little boy. And I was like, Mom told us not to play with those in the house. And I guess I was being annoying because he threw his basketball at my head. And it hits me and I fall over, and in my head I'm like, I could do one of two things. I could tell my mom and get him in trouble, or I could fake my death. So I pretended that I was dead, and I was sitting on the floor like, and I sat there for a long time and I really tried hard not to breathe or move. So he runs over to me and he's trying to see if I'm okay, and he notices that I'm not moving, and he really thought that I had died. So he starts to cry and freak out, and then it makes me laugh, and then he beat me up, and then I started crying.
Story time on how my parents sold me to my uncle. Okay, so boom, let's get straight into it. Ever since I was a kid, everyone would compliment me on how beautiful I was. Literally got complimented everywhere me and my family went. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, it's important. My parents didn't see me as their beautiful child. My parents seen me as dollar signs. I was literally up for sale, and my parents were bidding on who would pay the most to marry me. My mom started teaching me how to cook and clean and how to keep a man happy. One day while my mom was getting me ready and all dolled up for dinner, I told my mom I didn't want to marry anyone, and she flat out told me I didn't have a choice. Well, little did I know that exact night my mom and I was having this conversation, my uncle was downstairs waiting on me. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how my parents sold me to my uncle. Okay, so boom, like I said, my mom was getting me all dolled up for dinner and my uncle was downstairs waiting on me. I didn't know this at the time, of course. My mom and I go downstairs and I hear my dad say, "There she is. Isn't she beautiful?" Then I looked at a man who just smiled and said, "I like it." I asked my mom who was that guy, and she told me, "Shh, that's your father's brother, sweetie, no more talking." So we all sat down and had dinner, and my uncle was just staring at me, smiling at me, and looking at me up and down. He was literally studying me. My dad even looked at him for validation. I was so confused. Little did I know this wasn't just a dinner. It was a tryout, an audition, if you will. If I would be good enough for my uncle. He was actually rich and looking for a wife, and my dad was trying to sell me to him. Running out of time, like for part 3. Part 3 on how my parents sold me to my uncle. So like I said, we were having dinner and my dad was trying to sell me to my rich uncle. He was literally pitching a sale. She's beautiful, she cooks, she cleans, and she's very smart. And oh, she still has her V card. It was at that moment it hit me. I figured out what was going on. When my uncle left, my parents told me good job for being a good girl. I cried and told my parents I did not want to marry that man. I was 15 and he was like 40, but my parents told me I was going to marry him and I was going to like it. Well, fast forward a year later and they definitely sold me. And I lost my V card to my uncle on our wedding night. I hated it at first, but I kind of fell in love with him. And it didn't hurt that he was rich and I kind of lived stress-free. So yeah, my parents sold me and that sucks, but I ended up being okay with it. Lucky. And we all laugh about it now. Yeah, I know it's toxic and corrupt, but this is why it's an anonymous story.
This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, "Well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open." She's like, "I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either." Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house. And so he jokingly asks her, "You ever see any ghosts walking around your attic?" Her face got completely serious, and she's like, "You know, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening. So we investigated and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years."
This man's wife left him, but not for the reasons he thought. Once there was a couple who just got married in Paris. They were very happy together, but the wife had one secret she didn't tell her husband yet. She had a birthmark on her face. She'd been wearing makeup to cover it, but she thought once she showed her husband, she would know whether he truly loved her. So after they got married, she took off her makeup and showed him. He was surprised, but he wasn't going to let that change anything. However, the next morning, his wife was gone. Her husband thought that she must have felt upset due to how surprised he looked when he saw her birthmark. Or maybe she had second thoughts. After months months of getting no reply, he finally gave up on trying to look for her. He was heartbroken, but after a few years, he got a new job in a different city. He wanted a fresh start in life, but things didn't go as planned. He came across a strange-looking circus called the House of Oddities. This made him very curious, so he went in. But what he saw inside would shock him. Among the other circus acts, he saw a twisted woman rocking back and forth, looking terrified. He screamed as he recognized the birthmark on her face.
So when I was a sophomore in high school, I had this teacher who would only let the students in her class use the restroom one time per semester. Well, one day I raised my hand and I was like, excuse me, I don't remember her name. Can I please use the restroom? And she was like, no, you can't because you've already used the restroom in my class this semester. Well, excuse me, you can't dictate my bladder. So I'm like all frustrated and I started secretly texting my mom because I wasn't allowed to use my phone in class. And I was like, Mom, I'm sitting in class right now. My teacher won't let me use the restroom. And she was like, I'll take care of it for you. And I was like, okay. So like 5 minutes goes by and all of a sudden my teacher's phone starts ringing and she walks up to it and answers it and she's like, hello? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And then she walks up to me like so angry and she like slams the pass on my desk and she was like, since you have to go that bad. And I was like, yeah, I really do, thanks. And I got up and left. I didn't even have to go to the bathroom. It was just the principle of it. I just roamed the halls.